Welcome to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. Deep dives through the journey of youth sports, what parents experience, what coaches experience, and most importantly, what your kids experience. We'll also feature the latest information, tips, tools, and resources to help parents, coaches, and athletes navigate and improve the culture of youth sports. And now, the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast.
Welcome back to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. I'm joined again today by my partner, Seth Taylor. I'm Travis Snyder, and we're looking forward into diving into number 5, you and your parents, speaking to your child and how to manage the relationship between themselves and their parents in the world of youth sports. Yeah. Seth, let's start off with an easy question. Yeah. Who is the most influential person in a child's sports development?
By far and away. The parents are the most influential. Nothing even comes close. No coach, whether good or bad, even comes close to the influence that a parent has on the athletic development of any child. And the main reason, of course, is because the foundations of an athlete's ability to excel and to handle the ups and the downs, the successes and the failures is 100% the identity of that child. So in the first 10 years, and we talked about this in video number 2, right? We talked about the identity formation. That identity formation, which is dependent on their relationship with mom and dad, is the foundations on which everything is built. So any influence a coach has is built on that. And if that is not solid, then the influence coaches have is relatively fragile. It can be large. A coach can influence a child in a profound way. But if that foundation is not there, then that influence has a I don't know, I guess fragile is probably the best word for it. It can't sustain as well.
Yeah.
That makes any sense.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about the car rides, right?
Yeah.
Which for parents, it's very instinctual, like response to want to just jump in and help correct your child's mistake or try and give them the mental preparation, right? To go out there and perform in practice or in the game. What advice would you give to parents as they think about approaching those conversations in a different way with more vulnerability?
Yeah. You know, the biggest thing is with parents is we have to recognize that our kids, especially if they're really young, okay, if we're under the age of 12 here, it's a little bit different than if they're over the age of 12, like 13, 14, 15. The developmental stage is different. So how they absorb information received from parents is very different, both, you know, verbally and non-verbally. But when they're young, okay, when we're talking about younger kids, remember, they're always asking 2 questions. What makes me safe? What makes me valuable? And those questions are subconscious. And so anything you say to them, they're actually trying to answer that question. So if they say, well, Dad, what did you think about how I played today? They're not asking, Dad, what did you think of how I played today? They're asking, what makes me safe? What makes me valuable? Am I safe and valuable here? That's what they're asking. And they've caught some sort of feedback thing that Dad likes to give feedback, so I want Dad to feel good. And they're already starting to take care of it. I can do that. Sometimes I've noticed even my son, because he knows I love soccer and he knows I love to do things when he comes off the field. He wants to know what I think, but I can tell he wants to know what I think because I love soccer and I like to talk about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? So he's asking me the question, am I good? Am I safe? Am I loved? And so anytime he comes off, for me, it's standard. Work with the emotions and work with the underlying need all the time. What's the underlying need for my safety, and for love and for affirmation in those spaces? So I ask him first, how are you feeling? And then if he doesn't have a lot to say in that, and if it approaches the game, I tend to reflect it back on him. So if he's saying, what'd you think, what'd you see in the game today? I'll just go, well, why don't you tell me what you saw? And I'll reflect back on that. And then I actually very carefully ask for permission. If he's wanting my feedback, I ask for permission first. So I'll go, you want to know what I think about that? Yeah. Okay, well, here's what I think. And then I'll tell him just little points here and there. And I watch very carefully. I watch his body language and I watch very carefully to see whether there's resistance to it or not. Because if there's resistance, it's not, even from older kids, even from teenagers, if there's resistance, if you see this kind of defensive build up or anything like that, it's not because what you're saying is right or wrong or they disagree with it. They're not in that space. You kids aren't going to be in that space till their mid-20s. What they are in is they're in resistance to critique, to that type of feedback, because it starts to violate that parent-child foundation, which is unconditional love. And so I'm very careful with that. So my son, I found that he has about a 30-second threshold for feedback. If I'm saying, well, what we want to try to do is, look up and and see that forward pass instead of always playing negative, or I'll say something like that. And after a few seconds, I'll see him kind of shift to this little bit like, can we move on, please?
Yeah.
And that's you've probably seen in your kids, right? You see it because that's when he's going, please, I think I don't feel good with this.
Yeah.
And I need your love back now.
Yeah.
And so I'm very careful with that and very aware of his needs in that space. And then then of course I try to check my ego. If my ego is really telling me how it wants to push in there, I'm careful with that.
Yeah, I can definitely relate because early on in my first child's experience, that instinct that I talked about earlier is to want to correct mistakes. Or, hey, you didn't listen very well today to your teacher or whatever class you're in.
Right.
And you can immediately see that resistance. You can immediately feel that shift in emotion in the car where now it's dad's coaching me instead of being my dad.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big takeaway for parents to understand. We really got to shift our mindset from wanting to coach and wanting to correct mistakes to, like you said, create that safe space. So leading into our next question, what is the largest problem in youth sports?
Again, by far and away, parent drama. The drama surrounding parents and the tensions that are created between parent and child, between parent and coach, between parent and referees, between parents and each other. The entire thing of how parents are constantly triggered in the space is by far and away the largest problem in youth sports. Nothing even comes close to it. It is the biggest financial drain. The constant turnover, kids quitting, coaches quitting, referees unable to function. All of that comes from parent trauma. And so that issue it's a multi-billion-dollar problem. And of course we're here saying we've got the solution to it, which is helpful. But yeah, that is by far.
What would be an obvious example of a parent? Maybe not obvious, a good example for parents, because a lot of parents think, well, I'm pretty good. I'm not doing too much, right, in terms of harming my child. But what's an example maybe that parents don't think about that happens on a regular basis in the world of youth sports?
The biggest thing I notice is the feedback from the sideline. Like so it's been interesting. It's been fun, like finally being on this side of things where I was on the coaching sideline for 20 years, and you're observing it from that side. Now I'm on the parenting sideline, like you are. You're on the parenting sideline, and the nonstop feedback loop is it's the biggest and most biggest problem, right? Not to mention the fact, and then when we talk about the car ride home, right? The car ride home is a huge, huge influence. But the constant feedback from the sideline is not only a distraction to what the kids are trying to do, and it's what's actually creating that foundational issue. You see the kids looking to the sideline all the time, but the way it interacts with each other, the way it interacts with the parents from the other team, the way it interacts with the referees. I mean, an obvious example is the ref makes a call and boom, instant feedback, right? From parents, whether that was good, bad, acceptable, not acceptable, and what we're teaching our kids in that space, as opposed to a neutral, almost silent kind of experience. The illusion is that the kids need to hear stuff.
Yeah.
They don't. They honestly, and it's as simple. In coaching education, we learned kids need one voice. They need to hear one voice out there, and that's their coach giving them instruction, that kind of thing. They don't need to hear the parents. They need to feel their parents, not hear their parents, right? And so that kind of thing, if we can, I just noticed that the nonstop, constant feedback from everything is too much for them and overwhelms them, and a lot of them tend to shut down, but it creates such a negative association with the game as it is,
Yeah. So one other topic for me that I think hits home is the way our parents raised us.
Yeah.
Right? And I grew up playing for very successful on paper teams and organizations that won state championships, national championships, year in and year out. And I think a lot of us, as we transition from being the child to being the parent, we think of those things that we learned as young kids and what our parents taught us, right?
Yeah.
And I think as I've been able to unpack, right, in our work together and just my own work on being a parent and seeing how things play out, you realize there's this idea that we need to do things the way that we were taught. Right. I think that's a big thing we dive into with Hero is we take parents through that experience, right, of what are your top 5 memories of sports.
Yeah.
And then being able to draw out the positive and negative experiences that we all have with our parents, excuse me, because no parents are perfect, right?
Sure.
So what would you say to parents that say, well, this is the way I was raised and this is how I'm going to do it?
See, that's the problem. And you're pointing out that's the real core of the problem. Is that so many parents, there are so many parents, and we're trying to reach those parents, right? We're trying to reach the parents who are lost in their egos, in their ego constructs of this is what it's supposed to be. And of course, that is there is a certain norm out there that we're trying to penetrate into, and we're not the only ones. There's other organizations and other people, and you're seeing it all over social media. People are trying to penetrate into the space to get to that parent's ego that says, this is the way I was raised, this is how things should be, and start to pay attention to the experience their kids are having, the experience what they're feeling. It's amazing with how much information is out there that parents are still locked into that space, but it says something about how, as parents, our own trauma, our own identities, our own struggles, and those kinds of things can be so intense that we build and structure these really strong narratives about what is true and what is not, and we project it onto our kids. And it's one of the reasons why in the sports world we haven't allowed the most common knowledge, research-based knowledge about child development and what's good for our kids to truly penetrate into ourselves. Like if I stopped at any youth sports game and I just went out and everybody just stop. This is madness. Wake up. Don't you see what you're doing to your child? And to watch how they would react to that kind of thing. This is the way it is. This is what that's all trauma-based. That's all trauma-based. That's why like these youth sports events and youth sports experiences, man, everybody's bringing their deepest stuff out there. And we have to grow an awareness of that. And you and I, we're not just trying, this is the thing about 3A. We're not just trying to help kids have a better experience and help parents have a better experience. We actually want to get great at these games too. I would love to see the U.S. win a World Cup someday. I would love to see these players, these baseball players that we see all the time in the major leagues that are just struggling to find consistency and deal with the pressure and all that kind of stuff. See them have a joyful experience and find excellence, right? But they cannot do it in this space, in this environment where all these parents are constantly projecting their needs onto their kids at such young ages. It's impossible.
So let's break down, why is it so hard to be a parent in youth? So we talked about the lack of self-awareness, right? There's financial pressure, the emotional stress, the desire to want to have your kids go out and achieve great things, keeping up with, as we mentioned, what's been normalized, right? I think that's a huge topic to unpack. It's just the way youth sports have pushed it down the chain to younger and younger competition-based experiences for children. The desire to teach grit. And then the classic, well, I just wanted to have fun.
Sure. Yeah. I just want to have fun. That's a great one, right? And it's funny because what you're running through is the top 10 Q&A kind of experiences I have when I give talks to parents. Yeah. I give talks to parent groups, and the Q&As are always like, how do I get to my kid to have grit? I remember, this dad, I just want my kids to have fun. And that's number one. You wouldn't believe how many dads have come up to me and said, well, that's one thing, I just told me, I want my kids to have fun. That's the main thing, just have fun. And just go, okay, well, if that comes with a cost as well, that's the pressure. Now they have fun. Kids don't need to be told to have fun. They don't. They're literally their natural expression. Their natural language is play and fun. And that's, that creative expression. The problem is that we jam it up, and then we know internally there's something wrong here. We've taken something from our kids. And so now we need to push it back towards them with some sort of weird new adult package around it. Right. That's the idea. But all these kinds of things, the reason when you ask that question, why is it so hard to be a parent in youth sports? Because parenting is the hardest thing in the world. And so any parent that's listening to this right now, I don't judge you. Parenting is the hardest thing. And every time I give a talk in front of people, I just get up there and go, first and foremost, welcome, to any parents that are here. I want to welcome everything in the room. And I usually tend to start calling out all the stuff we're all carrying, from day to day, and the struggles and the complexity of our lives. Parenting is the hardest thing in the world. It's the most triggering thing in the world, which is why youth sports is so hard. But when we thrust it into a competitive arena, we take the thing we love most in all the universe, our children, and then we throw it into a competitive arena where there's a nonstop feedback of winning, losing, success, and failure. It's profoundly triggering to us. And because many of us haven't done our own personal work, the deeper work that all human beings really need to engage in, because we haven't done that, all that stuff that's held in our unconscious rises to that space. It does anyway, right? It does at home. The messes and the struggles and the sleep deprivation and the constant, we're discovering, how many of us are always saying something our parents said to us, and we said we never would do that to our kids. It's because it's held in our subconscious. I still find myself doing that. I said something this morning to one of my kids that was like, Mom used to say that to me. Where did that come from? Right? It emerges from our subconscious space. Well, competition, those arenas are hard pressure arenas. What happens when you put pressure on something? It pushes up. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's like that brings that subconscious stuff to the surface. So the sports world is where the stuff comes out much more intensely, which is why someone can be a relatively semi-okay parent most of the time. But then at the sports space, it just gets bad.
Yeah.
And I've heard so many athletes go, yeah, my dad, once we, in the sports space, I couldn't handle it.
Well, and this is why you wrote the book, Hero, right? Because it is an interactive guidebook for parents to go through a set of processes and exercises to really uncover what's below the surface, what comes up in that arena, and how to manage those conversations, not only with your kid, but with the coach too, right? Because that's an important relationship. Secondly, we have the Athlete's Journal, right? That we're very excited about because there is a whole section for kids to dive into the relationship between you and your parents and how to identify the things your parents do that trigger you, right? But then also what we feel is most important in that whole experience in that section is how do you speak your truth?
Yeah.
I think for parents walking away from this to understand is how do you create a safe enough space for your child to be able to tell you how they actually feel without all the fear or the expectation that they know dad or mom likes to correct things or is really passionate about this.
Yeah.
So,
oh man. I'm working with this college. I've got a lot of college athletes I'm working with right now, and I'm working with one. And just the other day, she's a freshman in college. She was crying her eyes out because it's literally, she said, speaking her truth to her mother is not an option. She goes, it's not an option. You go, what do you mean it's not an option? Like the control is so intense, and it has been since she was so young. She goes, she will lose her mind. I'm like, right, but you're an adult now, and it's time for us to put up some boundaries and to do what's healthy for you. But literally, she was terrified at 20 years old, terrified. And so when we're dealing with that, we're already dealing with that type of terror. I mean, it was placed in her at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So that this is a really key thing, because I understand, when we're working with kids and when we're helping them, and then the Athlete's Journal is encouraging kids to speak their truth. As parents, we have to become aware of our own stuff and how it's projecting it and how we're creating this barrier where our kids can't be honest, right? That's a critical thing, that our kids have the ability to actually be able to say, this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing. In Hero, we actually do some therapeutic work with parents, right? In that book, there's a therapeutic process to help parents come to the point where they can receive that from their kids so that we can let our kids become, right? As opposed to this constant control. One of the things is, and this is kind of something I don't write a lot about in here or anything like that, but it's really important for parents to know, is that every human being is kind of tossed into what I call, there's kind of two different categories. All of us are trying to get our needs met, right? All psychologically, emotionally, we're trying to get our needs met. And those needs are for unconditional love. And we all carry this, even as adults. We carry this need for love. And then we were all kind of taught generally one of two ways to get it. We either take it. Yeah, I call those people bloodsuckers. We take the love we need, and those are the people that are kind of just constantly really controlling towards other people. Or we are caretakers, and caretakers are people who I give myself away, and if I can just take care of everyone else, then I'll get what I need. Which, of course, that never really works. And a lot of our kids, we train them to be caretakers in a lot of their primary relationships because we require certain things of them. They have to make us feel emotionally okay, so that then they can, if I feel emotionally okay, then they can get the love they need, and they learn how to do that. And that's so they suppress their truth. Instead of being able to say, Mom, that hurts when you do that. Mom, Dad, I don't want to talk to you about how I did today. Right? Dad, that it doesn't feel good to me when you coach me like this. I don't want to learn how to do this for you. Be able to speak that truth because they're trying to find that boundary. We instead will find, if you don't want to learn what I have to say, and then you can go this. We teach them with this emotional kind of manipulation, this subtle emotional manipulation, that they have to give away their truth in order to get love. And of course, that comes into play later on in their own intimate relationships and their own marriages and things like that later on, which, we've talked about marriage a lot, and how those childhood patterns really come into play. And that's a huge thing. I mean, that's a deeper thing. And where we really get into more therapeutic stuff, but that's huge. That's a huge, huge element. I mean, the kids are over there, and when they're on the field, it's amazing. They are looking to the sideline going, how do I make, subconsciously, how do I make Mom and Dad okay? How do I do what's needed to make them okay right now? I'm doing the best I can to accomplish that.
And after this short commercial break, we'll be back to dive into tools and tips for you to be able to work better with your child.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like Hero, an interactive guidebook taking parents of young athletes on a journey through their own experiences and perspectives, and how to approach the balance between being a loving parent and encouraging your child to push through challenges and excel in their endeavors. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.
So, Seth, what are some solutions to this major problem that we're outlining here?
Yeah. Number one solution is what we are calling awareness. That's a term we use in the kids' journal. It's a term we use in Hero. I'm trying to teach this concept. Awareness is simply an awareness of how our subconscious is rising in these situations and knowing that so it's bringing a new sense to these experiences. So, good example is I'm going to the game and I have an awareness not only of what my thoughts are, I have an awareness of what emotions I'm experiencing, whether it's, worry, nerves, fear, frustration, excitement, hope, whatever those emotional experiences. And then it's also awareness of what my body's experiencing, because actually, there's a lot of research around this, of course, that how we hold trauma, we hold it in the body. So when people say, I have some anxiety today, my kid's playing a big game and I got some anxiety. Like I've got a kid playing in the GA Cup right now. It's huge, biggest soccer tournament in the world, right, for kids. And the mom's there, and I know she's in the SAS, and she's got a tightness in her chest, right? She can call it anxiety. Well, and she can have her thoughts, she can have the emotional. Let's be aware of what our bodies are feeling. So as we go there, if we're aware of those kinds of things, we can start to focus and go, okay, and that brings us into our body like, oh, it looks like I need to take care of myself, right? As opposed to make my kid okay.
Yeah.
Even the mental, the thoughts and the emotional structure tends to stay in the mind, what I call the ego, right? In the egoic mind. But in the body, we can kind of be aware, right, there's something here I need to take care of. This is not my kid, this is me, right? And so I'm going to sit on the sideline and just be very aware of this kind of thing, and then I'm going to watch my thoughts. And so if we can become what someone called the observer, right? We call it, I think in here I call it the watcher. Yep. Become the watcher. That's the number one way to deal with this thing. We would just start to observe thought. We start to observe feeling. I notice that. I bring that awareness to every time I watch my kids play. And every once in a while, my wife will check me on it too, because if she hears me start to say stuff, she'll go, hey, you all right? And I'll go, I remember one time, actually this last season, when my son's soccer season, I was like, no, I'm not. I am going to go take a walk right now. And I actually went and took a little walk and just kind of became aware of my breath and brought myself back into my own body, just going, okay, what parts of me are coming into play here? But I have allowed myself to be, I've humbled myself enough to recognize that whatever's going on inside of here, if I project it on him, or I project it on my daughter at her volleyball games, then they have to carry me. And in a sense, I'm asking my children to parent me. And so the solution to this thing is recognizing that, one, we do that. All of us do that. And it's happening all around you. And it's your responsibility to deal with your stuff, not the other parents, right? Unless they're looking at you going, hey man, what's happening to you? Right? But it's our responsibility to deal with that stuff so our kids don't have to carry us.
Yeah. And I think for parents, next time you go to a sporting event, observe yourself. And if that's too hard, observe the people around you. We all have memories of parents that go above and beyond in terms of their emotional responses to, like you mentioned, a ref's call or a play in the game or a coach's decision, right?
Yeah.
Where that energy field that's being created in the sidelines and the stands can be very toxic for just a parent to be sitting there, right? Plugged into that energy field, feeding off of those emotions of the parents around them. And it's very easy to collectively, right, bond in a way that creates that negative reaction or that negative energy that's pushed onto the kids.
Right.
The other piece for me is, how can a parent, right, when they're in that situation, maybe they've said something or they've done something, how can then they go and repair that with their child? Once they've brought the awareness to the situation, oh, I said something I shouldn't have said, or I tried to coach my kid in the car or during the game. What would you tell to a parent in that situation?
Yeah. Well, a good apology goes a long way, But But a lot of times what I found is that letting your kids be aware that you're aware of something in yourself. So it's not just, hey, buddy, I'm sorry I said that to you. That's nice.
Yeah.
But being like, hey, buddy, I got some stuff inside me that comes up when I watch you play. And it's because I love you a lot. But also Dad's got his own stuff.
Yeah.
I got my own. So I actually tell my kids, I've taught my kids the line. So they understand. I go, Dad's got his own kind of trauma. And that trauma shows up sometimes when I watch you play because I love you so much.
Yep.
There's a big, I call it big feelings. I have a lot of big feelings. And sometimes I think I throw that at you and I'm sorry. And I'll just let them know I actually get that going. And I think it's a really healthy thing for parents to be able to explain to their kids that I was a kid once too.
Yep.
And I have this kind of stuff inside me and I throw it at you sometimes. And that's something I got to work on. And it's a way of holding ourselves accountable, especially if we actually determine to work on it. And that's what we're trying to do. Like with Hero and with these podcasts, we're trying to give people tools. Like, here's some tools. Snap to that awareness.
Yeah.
Right. Develop that awareness, by the way. It doesn't happen naturally. It has to be developed. That's why we have exercises in Hero to develop that awareness. It's a type of meditation. Meditation is the ability to observe. That's really meditation summed up in just one phrase: the ability to observe oneself, observe thoughts, observe feelings, observe emotions, observe body. And sometimes we lose that ability to observe because of what we hold inside. And if it sounds like ultimately this leads to all of us seeing therapy, it probably does, right? But I don't know anyone who wouldn't benefit from that. So. But that's what Hero is. It's a little meditative therapeutic process so that we can all kind of engage in that. And that's a healthy language to teach our kids. Is a healthy paradigm to give our kids.
Yeah.
So I explain to my kids, we have it very openly, like, hey, Dad's got some stuff too. And I'm just working with it.
Yeah. And I think humanizing that experience the same way we're trying to tell parents listening to us right now, we still deal with this stuff. Just because we developed an awareness doesn't mean thoughts and emotions and our own traumas don't show up.
Yeah.
But being able to create that boundary, right, of saying, I have this awareness, this is where I draw the line. Yeah. This is where I know I need to go further into this in my own personal journey, right? If that's through therapy or through meditation or a combination, encouraging parents to find a way to process those emotions because at some point they're not going to be able to just say, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And you have to take that responsibility like you alluded to. So I think that's great.
Well, and one thing I want to add to what you're saying, because you were saying, observing the other parents too. As long as we have an eye on ourselves, right? Because a lot of parents observe the other parents in judgment, right? I had a mom after a game the other day at my son's game, and I had my mom approach me and say, and with a judgment of another parent, did you hear that parent? I think they kind of know what I do for a living. So they're like, did you hear that parent say that thing? And I said, yes, I did. And they were, look, that's not okay. Do you agree? I don't think that's okay. And so-and-so doesn't think that's okay. Yeah. That mom, I know for a fact, says all kinds of really intense stuff to their kid. And there's all kinds of stuff. So I just kind of look at it and I said, yeah, it's not okay. I said, but also I said, hey, he's working through it. Yeah. Let's let him work through it. Let's be kind. And let's we're all in this together. Yeah. That's right. Let's help each other work through this. But number one, let's take responsibility for our own process. For sure. And giving grace, right? And understanding this isn't about judgment. Yeah. This is about creating awareness with parents, burdening them with this information and knowledge so that there's nothing else you can do other than look inside, take responsibility, start to do the work yourself, and understand that the long-term effects that are going to be taking place over the next 5 to 10 years of your kid's childhood experience of playing sports is going to be fundamental, right, to the relationship that you have with them when they're done playing, right, and how you experience those things once they become parents too. And that's well said, when you say burdening them with this, that's well said, because it's one of those, like, what does it say in the old scriptures that says, he who increases knowledge increases suffering, right? There is a burden to this awareness. And I think that's one of the reasons why it doesn't come into the culture, because we're all scared of that awareness, because then we have to deal with it. Yep. So what are some signs parents should look for to identify when their child may be triggered on the field? When they're looking at you a lot, when they're less focused, they're more focused on you or their coach than they are in their game. When they're nervous, when they're bringing up, when they start to say things like, yeah, I'm not sure, I don't think we're going to do so good today, or, there's a good chance we can lose today. When they start bringing up that stuff, it's because there's a fear present. When they're hyper distracted, What about hyper competitive? Hyper competitive is a huge one. That's a really common one, right? I was that child, by the way. Right. I believe you. Totally believe you. Where it's like, your mother would have said to me, well, Travis is just very, very competitive. If a child is hyper competitive at 7, 8, 9 years old, that's because of trauma. That's a literal trauma response. It's not a natural thing for a child to be competitive. Some kids have more intense personalities than others, but kids learn over time because of the feedback that happens from winning and losing, successes and failures. They learn over time that I can get the love I need here. And then they start to see the other kids' successes as a threat to that, right? It's a very almost caveman-like response. If you get some of the food, then that's less food for me. You know what I mean? And so that competitive, that need to be on top. And of course, that's a time bomb being planted within a child because eventually they're going to lose. Because if they're really good here, they're going to get put to this level. And if they're really good there, they get put to this level. And eventually they're going to run into a situation where they're going to get knocked down. And when they do, how can they handle that? Well, a lot of them can't. Right. So yeah, a competitive child is a traumatized kid.
How can we help our kids create an awareness to and work through their triggers?
Yeah. So as we develop that awareness within ourselves, we gain the ability to help our kids with that. But if we do not develop it within ourselves, it's almost impossible to give that to a kid. We can help kids learn to observe their thoughts. Like what I do with my son when I ask him about his emotions. How you feeling, bud? He'll go, good. I go, okay, good. Right. If I'm not aware of myself in that moment, I'm going to just work into my ego. And so helping him work through his stuff is going to be really, really tough. If he has a hard time, like my son the other day, they got beat 10-4 in a game. I mean, they got pounded and they'd won 4 games in a row and they were on this kind of illusionary state that they were really good because they've been playing against bad teams.
Yep.
Played against a really good team. They come out there and they get smashed and you can see it. Some of them were emotionally distraught. Well, how's a parent supposed to help them work through the illusions that they'd created in their minds of good and bad and who's good and who's not, and work through their emotional experience if they can't do it themselves? So the number one thing to help kids go through it is to do your work.
Right. Model the behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Model behavior. Yeah, that's something, if you work through Hero, you work through it intentionally, all the tools will be right there. You'll know exactly what to do. You'll know exactly what to say. You'll know exactly how to make them feel and how to direct their process.
And that was a big focus for us in developing the Athletes Journal, right, for the kids, to be able to take them down that path, right. To understand what are the things with mom and dad, what are the things with our coach, right? What are the things with the experience of being out there with your buddies or playing against your buddies, all these triggers that are out there.
Yeah.
The Athletes Journal, I'm so excited because kids actually get an opportunity, right? Separate from mom and dad. And we encourage all parents to work through this journal with their kids, obviously go through Hero, do the work yourself, but then transitioning into that Athletes Journal experience for their child is really diving into the 3 levels. So we talked about what are the thoughts, what are the emotions, what are the energy?
Yeah.
And then how do we process that, right? And how do we make adjustments from week to week, month to month, to be able to say, okay, this got me last week, but I'm more prepared this week, right? And I'm creating the awareness within myself because it's difficult, as you said, for parents to just go out there and say, well, son, this triggered you, this triggered you, this triggered you, and this is how you should.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and especially if there's an agenda attached to it, part of what we have to be able to do is let go of the agenda. Like, I would love to see my son play in a World Cup. I would. I got that visual in my mind, so I can see it in my mind, like him pumping his fist, scoring a goal. I would love to see that. But the thing is, because of my awareness of my own trauma and how things were done upside down for me, I'm very aware. I'm accountable to that awareness, and it forces me to have to let go of my agenda and know what my job really is, my role really is. So it takes a certain level of faith and trust. Yeah, you kind of have to go, okay, I'm going to trust that if I do my job well, that thing will build on itself, and I don't have to control all of it.
Yeah.
And therein lies a freedom, by the way. There's a freedom to just enjoy.
Yep.
It's very freeing.
Let your kids experience.
Yeah.
Well, on our next episode, we're going to be diving into the relationship between your child and your coach. Again, looking forward to unpacking the dynamics there, as well as for parents too, right? Because that's a difficult relationship for parents to manage with all the emotions, the expectations, the financial pressures and investment that you're making in your child's sports experience. So really looking forward to that.
Rachel, thank you.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like 3A Sports Journals. Many athletes don't journal because they simply don't know how it can be helpful to their process. Elite athletes around the world use journaling from an early age to help them face the tough challenges of sports. If your kids want to go from good to great, they need to learn how to journal. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.